What is up, everybody? Clint Lamb with Cover Crimson, back for another live show. Took a couple of days off, obviously, for the weekend, but we are back. It is Sunday night, our first Sunday night live show. Do not have the call-in aspect or element set up yet, but we are planning on getting that going at some point in the future, hopefully in the near future. But we're here to talk about a couple of things, including Jacarrius Peak, the South Carolina offensive tackle, former NC State offensive tackle, the injury that he suffered yesterday, which was reported yesterday, that could end up, impacting or prematurely ending his 2026 season, and just what this means as far as like the risk that you take when it comes to the transfer portal and adding these big ticket guys that cost you a lot as far as your NIL or financial side of things. And we're also going to be talking about Ty Simpson. He will be throwing at the combine. That's going to be an interesting conversation. And we will also be taking your comments or questions or whatever else. First of all, appreciate you guys for spending your Sunday night with me here at Cover Crimson. Also, for any Night of the Seven Kingdoms fans, that finale, season finale for season 1 is going to be coming up. I think it releases here in a couple of hours. So definitely wanted to get people out of here before that happens because I know I'll be partaking and watching. I'm excited about that. So just a lot to talk about. First of all, appreciate you guys for being here. Secondly, let me know if you're a fan of that show and if you're excited about the finale coming up. It was obviously a big episode 5 that happened this past Sunday, and another big episode coming up this evening. Mimi's, appreciate you being here. Roll Tide to you. It's Mimi too. Roll Tide to you as well. Thank you guys so much for being here. All right, so we'll go ahead and dive in and start talking a little bit about Jacarrius Peak. So here's what we know. We know that he suffered a knee injury yesterday. He suffered it playing basketball. It was supposed to be a team-sanctioned basketball event, I think is at least the rumors. Now, we know that it was basketball-related. I don't know if it's been confirmed that it was team-related activities or team-sanctioned activities, but that's kind of the rumor right now. And from everything that we heard yesterday, it was not looking good for Jacarrius Peak as far as his 2026 outlook. It could be a knee injury that ended his season before it could really ever get started at South Carolina. Now we got a comment or a statement from South Carolina, and this is what it read. It said Jacarrius Peak suffered a lower body injury earlier this week and will miss spring practice. We expect that he will be available this season. Now, that is from the South Carolina program. That's a little bit different. That's a little bit more of a positive outlook as far as Peak's potential availability for 2026 compared to what we were hearing as recently as Saturday night and into Sunday morning. But we still don't know when that will be. Now, that's South Carolina. That's not Alabama. So you might be asking, why are we even talking about this? Number one, Peak was a guy that Alabama had extreme interest in. He was one of the top available offensive tackles in the transfer portal. Some places, I think, had Jordan Seaton as the number one. Some places had Peak. I was extremely high on him. I made videos talking about how he would transform Alabama's offensive line, just the experience that he brought to the table, the athleticism, the NFL upside. This guy, is a really, really good player. And when he entered the transfer portal, Alabama got Hollywood Smothers, his teammate, former teammate at NC State, had gotten him on campus. Things were looking pretty good for Alabama with Hollywood Smothers. And there was some hope that they could get Peak on campus and maybe end up pitching him or getting him involved or getting him locked in to be the starting left tackle in 2026. But unfortunately, they never got that opportunity. He never got to campus because he ended up committing to South Carolina, which I believe was his first visit. And that's how it goes. South Carolina understood the talent that he was. They understood that they needed to give him a big financial commitment in order to secure that commitment. And that's exactly what ended up happening. But here's the reason that I wanted to talk about this. Not just because he was once connected to Alabama. And we can't, first of all, I want to start this by saying I'm wishing him the best. I hope he is available for the start of the 2026 season. I hope he has a very successful season for South Carolina. No bad blood, no ill will whatsoever towards Jacarrius Peak. There was no commitment to Alabama. There was no, Hollywood Smothers ended up bailing on his commitment. If you want to feel a certain way about that, I actually more so understand it. But Peak was one of those guys. Obviously, you wanted to be compensated. You wanted to probably play in the SEC. You wanted to be given an opportunity to kind of put his skill set on display. And he got a lot of those boxes were checked at South Carolina. So if they met what they needed to as far as the financial side, I understand it. But this is why that you run a massive risk when you play this NIL game. I have said continuously, if Peak would have ended up at Texas and the same thing would have happened to him, Texas, that's unfortunate for Texas. It would have been completely unfortunate. But they are in a position where they can keep swinging. You hate it. It certainly would impact their 2026 season. But is that going to deter them from taking the big swings moving forward? No, because they have seemingly an endless stream of financial support where they can suffer those types of blows. But imagine a place like Alabama. Imagine if Courtney Morgan would have made Jacarrius Peak the exception that everybody wants. And, hey, just do it with this guy. We really need a left tackle. This guy's an absolute stud. Go ahead and make this the exception, pay him a lot of money, run the risk of upsetting the players who are already on your roster, but then also guys in the future who say, hey, well, you must not respect me very much because you're willing to make an exception for him, but not for me. You run that risk, but make this one guy the exception. And then what if that would have happened the same way to Alabama after handing over this huge financial commitment? Number one, Alabama would have been at a disadvantage when it comes to the NIL, portions that were available to other players, but also like they can't afford for this type of thing to happen to this type of player. Yes, they gave Devin Tompkins a very, respectable sum, and Terrence Green and some of these other players, they will play the NIL game to some extent. They want to be in a respectable ballpark. But they also understand that, number one, once you enter that type of game where you have elevated what you are willing to give certain guys, you have to keep playing that game. In Alabama, that's unsustainable for Alabama and pretty much every other program other than a select few, a Texas Tech, a Texas A&M, a Texas. And so they can't afford to be jumping into that type of arena, especially not right now with the way things are set up. But it would be especially catastrophic if you were to take that opportunity, completely change how you have to operate as far as your NIL, approach, and then you lose that key player. That is catastrophic. And in South Carolina, they ended up getting some other players that were respectable. They had to take care of some of their own. Lenore Sellers, I don't think he's out here demanding top of the line money. In fact, he could have entered the transfer portal and gotten way more money from somebody else, but he wanted to be at South Carolina. His father has talked about, you don't need the $8 million. You need to be where you're at right now. And so I'm sure they're taking care of him financially, but that's a guy who, in my opinion, has his head screwed on straight. They ended up keeping Nick Harbor around. They kept Dylan Stewart on the defensive side of the football. So they ended up paying some players. It wasn't just Jakarius Peak, but he was the crown jewel of their transfer portal class. And I almost guarantee you, they spent a lot of money for him to not end up anywhere else. Getting that first visit is important. And I'm sure Shane Beamer, he's a salesman. He would be a great guy to play for. And South Carolina does have a little bit of recent success where you can say, well, last year we were on the brink of making the college football playoffs. And imagine if you were part of that South Carolina team that helped us get over the hump. And yes, it's a lot closer to where he was before, with NC State. But if I had to guess, they probably handed him a fairly large sum of money to not even give Alabama or LSU or Texas or anywhere else a chance for him to go there. And so I don't think South Carolina is a Texas or a Texas Tech or a Texas A&M or, Oregon to an extent or LSU right now or even Ohio State. I don't think they're to that point. So they probably committed a huge chunk to him. And it was critical, or it is critical, for him to be healthy and available to protect Lenore Sellers in 2026 for what's likely going to be his final season and help him get to the NFL and help you get over the hump, get back to the college football playoff, or at bare minimum, get things moving back in the right direction, or Shane Beamer's not going to have a job. You can't go 4-8 or whatever they went. Again, you simply can't do it. Alabama is not. Kalen DeBoer and Courtney Morgan, they're not where Shane Beamer is. But you have to be strategic in how you view some of these portal additions and what you're willing to do versus what you're not willing to do, because that is way more critical than people realize. People think it's just as simple as let's sign on the dotted line. Let's give this one guy an opportunity, give him a hefty amount of money, but then you got to make sure that player stays healthy. You got to make sure that it doesn't affect your locker room dynamics and how the other guys are going to feel. We've talked about all of it pretty extensively. But that's something that I really wanted to talk about, because as soon as I saw that, my first thought is my heart breaks for that kid. Now, hopefully he ends up being available for 2026, and hopefully he has success. I don't think he did anything wrong as far as his approach. And if someone's willing to pay you a lot of money and you like where you're at and you think you can make it work, all power to you. But my next thought was, man, imagine if Alabama had paid him that sum of money, that which everybody wanted them to do, and then imagine him having the same type of thing happen. Now, granted, this was, some people are, or at least were, upset with Shane Beamer for sanctioning this type of, I guess it was a 3v3 basketball tournament amongst the team. I don't know the details. I'm not going to claim to know the details, or at least not to the extent that I need to. But, if that ended up happening, there's a reason that NFL players aren't allowed to go play pickup basketball, often. That you run the risk of injury. And if these NFL teams are making significant financial commitments to these players, there's obligations. You can't just go do whatever you want to. And so the fact that this was sanctioned by the team reportedly, that was a bad look on Shane Beamer's part. Not saying he would have suffered the same injury had he come to Alabama in the same way, but I am saying that imagine if that had happened while he was at Alabama after you had promised him this amount of money. I mean, it's a dangerous game to be playing. There's no doubt about it. Let's see. The BD James, we haven't watched it yet. Night of the Seven Kingdom is what I think he's referring to. I asked about that earlier. You need to. James, I'm telling you, brother, it's a wonderful show. I think you're really going to enjoy it. It's great character writing. It's great dialogue. I mean, I got to be honest, it's one of those shows where if you got to have something grab you or hook you from an action standpoint, from the jump, I don't know that it's the show for you. But if you like great character build and relationships and really starting to care about characters and the dialogue and all those things, if that's what's important to you, it's the show for you, no doubt about it. So I would definitely go check it out. Tucker, I appreciate you being here. Big fan of this show. Roll Tide, thank you so much. I don't know if you're talking about this show or if you're talking about Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Either way, I agree, and I appreciate you very much. Thank you so much for being here, brother. Tough as nails, Roll Tide to you. Bama Boy Davis, what's good, Clint and Bama Nation? Good to see you here, man. What do you think about this, guys? I want to know y'all's thoughts on the transfer portal. And now that you've seen something like this happen with a huge name, every Bama fan, or at least more than likely just about every Bama fan, because of how good Jakarius Peak was and because of how important he could have been to the offensive line, everybody wants to see improvement at that position. A lot of fans know who Jakarius Peak is. And so I want to know your thoughts on, and once again, he wouldn't have been in the position that he was had he went to Alabama. Probably doesn't suffer the injury, but I'm saying, let's say this happens to Alabama after you made a huge financial commitment. I mean, how would you feel? And has that changed the way that you maybe look at the transfer portal, or are you still saying, doesn't matter, I'm still all for it, keep making those swings? I believe that if you find the right guy and he comes at the right price, I think that, I'm for it. I just don't think you need to say highest bidder. That's not how Alabama wants to operate. They want to have guys that want to come to Alabama. We've talked about that extensively, and they've had a lot of success as far as a lot of the players who are in Tuscaloosa are guys who really want to be in Tuscaloosa. And I think that right now, that's very, very important. I mean, there's other elements of roster building and team building and just the dynamics or the ins and outs of program building. But I think Alabama's got a really good feel for who they are right now and how they want to build things. And I think that's ultimately going to make a pretty significant difference when it comes to, Alabama's success moving forward. Doesn't mean that they won't have hiccups or problems. I'm just saying that I kind of agree, and I have agreed for a while. It didn't take this situation unfolding for me to sit here and say, oh, well, I mean, actually, now that I think about it, they shouldn't be making these, moves. If they would have made one of these moves, I will never be upset about adding an elite player. But I also would have understood, all right, you're playing a different game now. Let's see what you do with it. Let's see how you hold up. And that was something that I would have at least questioned and wondered, okay, I mean, now that you're playing this game, how's that going to end up impacting others? Edward Dempsey, I believe in Courtney Morgan, Roll Tide. I'm right there with you, man. I do too. And I just think that right now, I feel like I have a pretty good feel for how this staff operates. And yes, I talk to people from time to time. It's a lot of what it is I feel like I've just gotten, I feel like we think a lot alike. Like a lot of the moves that I feel like Alabama should make or how they should approach things. They end up, doing a lot of it because I understand, have really tried to, or at least I've tried to understand where Alabama's kind of limited right now. Things don't operate from a recruiting standpoint the same way. Yeah, obviously you don't have Nick Saban. You're not going to get the Nick Saban discounts. Just things are different, whether it be for Alabama or for the rest of college football. And I like how Courtney Morgan is navigating those waters. Doesn't mean that I'm guaranteeing that's going to translate to on-field success. There's way more that goes into it. I think that there's still a lot of things that Alabama needs to work on from a coaching staff perspective, from a player perspective. They got to play with an edge. They got to play. They did at times. They came together and they put their foot on the gas and they really had a lot of success there for stretches. But this is a grind. This is why it's so difficult. It is week in, it's week out. You got to keep pushing. I didn't see that to the extent that we all wanted or needed to see. And so that's something that they need to improve on. A lot that they need to improve on. But I like how they're kind of starting to I like how they're building things right now. And there will be growing pains, but I'm excited. Tough as nail. Look what Proctor did to Iowa last year, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, that's true. That's very true. And I think it was a situation where he didn't have the freshman season that he wanted. He got a lot of criticism from Alabama fans. He was a high-profile recruit. He was used to everybody singing his praises and everybody wanting him. And so that can be tough for a kid. I can't really necessarily say that I blame him, but, he was comfortable at Iowa before. That was his home state, and he really, everybody was singing his praises there when he was planning to go there and be that in-state prodigy. And so he decided, hey, let me get closer to home. He went, and then he realized, man, I really built some connections at Alabama, some friendships, and I really didn't realize what I had. And so he decided to, less than a semester later, make the move back and was obviously pretty successful at Alabama. Could have probably been more successful, but overall he had quite a bit of success. Edward Dempsey, does Austin Mack graduate after spring semester? Man, that is such a great question, Edward. Man, that is such a great question. I need to look into that, and I will, because that is, just knowing that is a really good piece of information right now. Granted, I have said continuously, I think both players are getting opportunities in the spring. I don't think we're going to be any closer by the end of spring than before as far as naming a starter or seeing Alabama name a starter. And so I don't necessarily know that it'll matter. And I don't necessarily know that he has to be a grad transfer. Granted that those guys are not going to have any issues making the move, but I almost guarantee you there's going to be some who are not grad transfers, who don't qualify, who are going to test the waters. And so even if he's not, I wouldn't say that automatically makes him safe. We'll have to see how that plays out and what that looks like. But I think everybody's really starting to come on. We've been talking about it for weeks on this show that because at first, right after the winter transfer portal window closed, we talked about this is great news. Now you can really start committing to some of these battles. You know who's going to be on the roster. If a guy wins the battle and you feel like it's okay to go ahead and make that commitment to a guy, you can. You don't have to worry about guys transferring out in that second portal window. But it was like right after we had that conversation that we immediately started thinking, well, maybe not. Maybe there's some people, with everybody trying to test everything nowadays, maybe we shouldn't be jumping to those conclusions. And that also makes me worried about A-Day, by the way. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a game. I did it first, but with some of those risks still there, you're not going to see anything on TV, in my opinion. People just probably need to go ahead and wrap their minds around that. I hate it. It's disappointing. Maybe if we get one step closer next year or 2 years, maybe we end up seeing it again. But right now, I don't know. I think that everybody's trying to figure out what's going to happen. Now, granted, if it does operate this way, if this does end up happening, if what we're predicting or expecting actually does take place, whether it be a grad transfer or whether it be a guy who is not, who decides to test the waters, this does give you some opportunities to change some things up as far as your roster. I don't think it's going to be anything drastic. I don't think you have to worry about 15 plus players entering the transfer portal post spring, but maybe you end up losing one or two guys. Maybe there are a couple of pretty key guys that you were really hoping or expecting would be a part of that room. But you also, on the flip side of that, maybe you get another wolf, that you feel really good about, or maybe you get a clearly established bandit. We know they wanted PJ Adebawori, or at least that's what I had been hearing from several reliable sources. And we know that they had a huge interest in Jordan Ross. And I don't know if they would have played the same position. I don't know if either one of them or both of them would have played bandit. But part of me thinks if you see Devin Tompkins at 3 tech pretty consistently in the spring, and you don't hear a ton of buzz about Cavante Henry really emerging as a bandit, or maybe one of these freshmen or somebody really starting to step up, I'm telling you, I think bandit's one of those positions. I think they wanted a guy, a bona fide dude at that spot. And so that would be one that I would circle right now. And I would say, if I had to guess, if there was anybody as far as the spring, post-spring practice, that they will try to target potentially, that would probably be one of the top positions I would look at. Let's see. The BD James, Bama is using the portal correctly, augmenting what they have without breaking the bank. And it's once again, they're paying. Jimmy and I talk about this all the time, and I guarantee you, in fact, I know other Bama content creators, they acknowledge this as well. And a lot of fans do too. Bama will spend money. They're not cheap and they're not broke. They just, right now, with the way they've structured things, if you are doing what you need to do and you are getting you're evaluating properly, you're hitting on the right 5-star recruits at the top of your high school classes, and those guys are coming in, the Dijon Lees, the Michael Carrolls, the Justin Hill types. I mean, there's guys all across the board. But if you're getting the contributions that you need out of those guys, well, once they've gotten to the college level and they've established themselves, if you're Dijon Lee and you have now, I had the 5-star pedigree coming out of high school, I got here and I ended up making a substantial impact for you. Now I'm established here. Now it's not a guessing game as to whether or not I'm going to be good on this level. Now you need to make more of a financial commitment to that guy. But if you're hitting on those players, if you're getting those players right, and then you're hitting on these lower guys, these guys that aren't costing you much, a London Simmons, or, I don't know what the financial commitment was to like a Lottie Brooks, but he was a lower rated guy. But if you're getting contributions from those players, well, now they're not going to just continue to be a cheap option on your roster. Now I'm playing London Simmons. It's like I'm playing like a starter. I'm going to be a starter. You can't pay me like you did. And I'm not saying these out here, slamming the table, but this is what Courtney Morgan does. I don't think London Simmons has to go to Courtney or this staff and say, I want more money. I think they're approaching London and saying, brother, you're doing your part, man. We love what you're doing. Keep doing it. Let us help you. Let us, up that for you. And I think the players respect that. And so if you're hitting on those players as well, now you've got a lot of different guys who you're making commitments to. And so you're not going to have the available NIL funds to go out there and take massive swings. And if you do, it's once again, you run a massive risk like with Jacarrius Peak. And so I think the approach is supplementing. It's looking and it's saying, okay, where do we need help? What do we need as far as starting caliber players? And they needed help on the interior based off of what they had lost with LT Overton and James Smith and Tim Keenan and Keon Keeley and Jordan Renaud. We need defensive line help. Well, who do they go and get? They go get Devin Tompkins, the number 2 rated defensive lineman in the transfer portal. They went and got Terrence Green, the number 4 or 5 rated defensive lineman in the transfer portal. Like, they went out and got 2 key players at that position that were very highly sought after, very highly rated, and they made a commitment, to get them into Tuscaloosa. And so, I mean, I like what they're doing. No doubt about it. Tucker, your show, of course, bro. Thank you so much for saying that, man. That means the world. It really does. But injuries are something I think about when you decide where to put the lump sum of money and how much depth teams have. Yeah, and I mean, if you feel good about Jackson Lloyd, if you feel like he has starting potential, if you can get Jakarius Peak for an affordable price to you, where it doesn't like Michael Carroll's not going to look at what you gave Peak and say, "Hold up, now that's not fair." He's like, "Oh, that guy's making about what I'm making." He's taking care of him like he's taking care of me. I get it. Well, if you've got that approach and you can get a player, a guaranteed player like Jakarius Peak, and he's only going to be around for another year, he's only got one more year of eligibility. Well, maybe you can end up hanging on to Jackson Lloyd, give him an extra year to develop, and that makes sense. But if you feel like Jackson Lloyd is close to being ready, you feel good about how he's progressing, and I'll go ahead and tell you the coaching staff really likes how he's progressing, and they think extremely highly of him, then maybe you're not going to – why would you go and take this swing that could cause all these locker room dynamics and upset guys and completely change? Like, I'm viewing that and I'm saying, well, take the sure thing. I'd love for them to have the sure thing. Their approach is we might have a really good player right here. I mean, we feel good about this. We're seeing him every day in practice. He's looking good. He's doing good things. I mean, but let's go pay this guy a crazy amount of money that could potentially rock the dynamics as far as the guys who are on the roster. And now if we want a guy in the future, now he's going to expect that. Everybody's going to expect it. I mean, it's just there's elements or wrinkles to this, and we constantly harp on it. In some ways, you guys might be sick of me saying it, but I just constantly want to reinforce what I think's going on, how I think the approach is, and why. The easy thing to do is just say, just do it. Just do it. Just get the player, man. We're just trying to get as much talent as possible. Swing for the fences. It takes discipline. I mean, it does. And a lot of people, myself included, we don't always have discipline. And I'm glad that Courtney Morgan and the actual decision makers here can exercise some discipline, because it could be a real problem for you if you can't. Despite the fact that you make, everybody happy in the short term, the long-term impact could end up being, a pretty big deal. Bama Boy Davis, this is the issue, paying a player, then he gets injured and can't play, sets you back when you was betting on the player. And that's it. And granted, Alabama's betting on players too. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, they need Devin Tompkins. They need Terrence Green. Those guys have to be dudes for them this year. You lost too much talent up front and defensively. They really can't afford, in my opinion, for either one of those two guys to be any sort of bust. At bare minimum, they need to be pretty close to what you were expecting or hoping for them to be. And what you're really hoping is that they exceed your expectations and they're even better. And that's great, but they at least need to give you what you paid them to give you and what you brought them in to give you. Like, you have to be able to do that. And so I'm not going to sit here and tell you, well, Alabama's not taking any risk and they're not betting on players or relying on players. They absolutely are. They're relying on Jackson Lloyd, because if they felt like they had nothing at left tackle, who knows where they would have been as far as from a desperation standpoint. But I think they were fine with adding depth and competition at left tackle, and Javen James, who is an established SEC starting left tackle who also has other years of starting experience. Yes, it was group of 5. It was not a Power 5 program, but he does have more starting experience. He's a little bit of an older player, and if Lloyd doesn't take that step forward, well, you're not completely screwed. You've got another guy in there who can at least give you what you feel like is serviceable play. Up and down and consistent right now, in my opinion, needs development. But maybe year 2 being in the SEC, he'll be more effective than he was in year 1 being in the SEC. Maybe year 2 being 320 pounds after playing at Akron the year before, like 285, maybe he's ready at 320 in year 2 compared to year 1. So they're fine with bringing that type of player in and saying, compete with this guy who we're really excited about. Push him, make sure we're covered if he doesn't take that step forward. But we feel like he's going to be that dude, and hopefully he becomes that dude. Like, I think they're fine with that. And what they're certainly fine with is going that route rather than throwing a ton of money, backing up the Brinks truck and handing a guy a ton of money. That player gets injured, but now Michael Carroll is sitting over there like, I know what you did, though. I know what you committed. You committed a lot to him, but I just see how it is. That's not what you want. So there's layers. Q Dixon, as a Bama fan, I don't like the portal, but if Bama had Texas A&M, and Texas Tech booster money, I would absolutely love it. We had Nick Saban, right? I mean, we in some ways that was the booster money, right? I mean, that was the trump card. And I think we all enjoyed what recruiting looked like during that time. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Texas is not doing what Nick Saban did. Texas A&M isn't. Texas Tech isn't. You know, it's a different time. And while money does matter, and a lot of guys, I mean, they can stack up their depth a little bit. You know, even Mississippi State, they have more money than, you know, Northern Illinois. And they went and got multiple starters from Northern Illinois, and barely any of them actually made an on-field impact from Mississippi State. But those guys got compensated more than they were going to get at Northern Illinois, and they got a chance to play in the SEC. So while they didn't, and I'm sure they were upset with their playing time, they were willing to take that risk without a guaranteed spot. So that is there is something to be said about that. But there's also, like, there's a bunch of players that, if I understand Hollywood Smothers went and Raleek Brown was there already, but understand Steve Sarkisian made the pitch to Hollywood Smothers. Raleek Brown has some slot ability. Like, we can get you guys on the field together, and we'll get you volume in the passing game. First of all, he's got a record of doing it. You know, you see his running backs, the way that they get them involved and get them the football quickly, and it kind of, in some ways, is an extension of their run game and all of that. But Raleek Brown does actually have some wide receiver ability. And the pitch there was kind of maybe similar to a Jahmyr Gibbs, where you would see him and Jace McClellan on the field at the same time a few years ago. It was, we can put him in the slot and you can be on the field. And then there's going to be times where Raleek is on the sidelines, and you want to have that player. You want to have somebody kind of relieving you as far as, you know, keeping tread off your tires and all that. You'll have plenty of opportunities, despite the fact that we have Raleek, for us to showcase you. And so, you know, that type of player was willing to go, despite the fact they already had another. But at some of these positions, it's a little bit more difficult. You know, is Melvin Siani, is he going to Texas if Texas already had Jacarrius Peak, you know, and they had their own tackle, Goolsby or whatever his name is, and they, you know, no. I mean, he saw an opening for him to have a pretty good opportunity to start, and so you can't just stack like Nick Saban did. But at the same time, with the way that Alabama is set up, if they could have dominant, you know, top of the line booster money, you're going to take that all day. Unfortunately, they don't, and that is part of it. I don't think that this is lasting forever. I really don't. I think we're in a very, you know, finite amount of time that we're going to look back on and be like, man, that was such a crazy few years. But I think they're eventually going to do something. I don't know what it'll look like. We can speculate. But during this time, yeah, it's fun. It's fun when you can do whatever you want to. Mimi's, that kind of injury had to be heartbreaking. Prayers for him. Yeah, and I want to continue to reiterate that. I'm hoping that he ends up being back. That was encouraging news. You know, I really do feel like that. You know, he ended up somewhere else. I would have loved for him to be at Alabama, but you never want to hear about any player getting injured like that. Lance Hunter, the Peak situation is a booster nightmare, lost millions. It's why a lot of rich dudes don't really do NIL. And imagine being a big time South Carolina booster, and you had somebody connected to South Carolina come to you and say, how'd you feel about going to the playoff, or almost going to the playoffs a couple of years ago? Felt pretty good, right? Yes, it did. Okay, well, we're trying to get back there. That's what we want to do. And you know, we got a quarterback. We need to protect him. You know, would you mind ponying up some money and helping us get this guy? And it's like, man, he can help Lenoris, huh? He can help keep him upright. Well, yeah, he got sacked a little bit too much. All right, you know what? I'll cut a check to you. And then that guy feels pretty proud. You know, he loves South Carolina. There's a reason they're boosters. They love the program. And then next thing you know, this guy comes in and he gets injured. And at first, it's like, this guy might miss all of 2026. You might not get anything out of this guy. He'll probably get a medical red shirt. You might get the benefit of him in 2027, but Lenoris Sellers might be gone by then. So he might be protecting somebody else. And now you're looking and you're like, that booster's over like, huh. So Lenoris didn't get the protection. No upgrade there. And I'm out a lot of money. And I didn't make this money by doing stupid things with this money. Imagine trying to go back to that booster the next year. You know, because I'm telling you, South Carolina doesn't have Texas money. It's not easy getting guys to do it over and over. So once again, you run the risk. But good luck paying next year's left tackle cheaper money. because you know what they know? Hey, you really wanted Jacarrius Peak last year, and what'd you do? You found them pockets. So I guess I don't mean a lot to you if you can't find it for me. That's what they're dealing with now. It's part of it. Let's see. Pat Nelly, Clint, is there any truth to the rumor that the defensive players that gave up in the Rose Bowl were not enthusiastically asked to stay at Bama? I don't know where you got this from, Pat. I would need to know more. Now, I've not heard anything about that. What I can tell you is that they're going to evaluate the effort of the players, the fit, from a cultural standpoint. Do you feel like they want to beat Alabama? Do you feel like that they are carrying guys in the right direction? You know, is there energy and effort and willingness to, you know, go the extra mile? Is that carrying players in the right direction, or do they have bad attitudes and you see them, you know, a lack of hustle? What I'm going to tell you is that first game against Florida State, the lack of hustle was alarming. It was so alarming. It was such a major red flag at the time. I was way concerned. But the fact that everybody responded in the way that they did from that point forward really impressed me, because that told me, I don't know if it was the humidity with being I don't know if they went too hard and fall. It could be a number of things. But I saw the want to after that point. I saw the embarrassment and I saw the way people responded. And that made me encouraged. Now, granted, just because you had that happen in week one and everybody's on your ass as a result, you know, but once everybody starts singing your praises and it's a long season, it gets tougher and tougher and tougher. And so while they did fall off, I really never saw an effort problem until Indiana, and they were having it handed to them. And I think that in a lot of ways where I feel like Alabama really screwed up, and I feel like I say this too often, by the way, which is why I'll continue to reiterate, they need to do better. The coaching staff needs to do better. But I feel like they underestimated Indiana. I feel like they didn't take them seriously enough. And Nikhil Green hinted at this when he was on the Bama Standard, you know, whenever that was, last week, week before, whenever. And it was, we thought they didn't play an SEC schedule. They haven't gone through what we've gone through. And we're going to get on the field, and they're going to find out. And the only team that found out anything was Alabama. Alabama found out real quick. And here's what I'll say. Nick Saban's players, if they were approaching a game with that mentality, it was not because of the coaching staff pushing anything, because Nick Saban would not let guys think that way. They might think that way themselves, and yeah, they might get on the field, but it was not coming from the top. And so what I feel like Alabama needs to improve on is, it don't matter who it is. It doesn't matter. You know, Indiana's a good football team. Anybody that covers the game, anybody that watched Indiana, and I said it all year, this 2025 Indiana is different than 2024. You can put on the tape, and it is light years different. I can sit there and say 2024 Indiana was a product of their schedule, and they got where they got because of their schedule. They were a good football team. They weren't bad, but they were in the college football playoff as one of the best 12 teams because of their schedule. But in 2025, I saw a team that was good. You saw it against Oregon. You eventually ended up seeing it against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. But it was way before that Big Ten championship that we were talking about Indiana and what they were as a team. And so if I'm seeing it, you're paid millions of dollars. You damn sure better see it. And I don't know to what extent they ended up, how it came from the top down. But I know guys like Nikhil Green went into that game with the wrong mentality, and they paid for it dearly. I'm getting off point here, but what I will say is that I didn't like how people quit. The season was over. I mean, when you're getting destroyed and you know it's over, there's not a next week, but there's pride, and there's, having pride in performance. And I feel like there was some guys give up, and that was concerning. That was frustrating for me as a fan, and I'm sure it was for you too. I don't know. And maybe some of the players who were ushered out the door, maybe some of them were some of the ones that the coaching staff was sitting there thinking, that guy didn't bring it to the extent that he needed to. But I have not heard nothing definitive on that, so I'm not going to act like I have. All right, a couple of super chats here. And by the way, if you want to have your comment read or question, answered or whatever, super chat's the easiest way to do it. I do like to get to the comments. I want you guys to drive a lot of these live shows, all these live shows pretty much, as far as how you want me to go. But the one way to guarantee that it's going to get addressed is through super chat. So D Kilgo, appreciate the $20 super chat. That means the world. It really does. Love the show, Clint, live or replay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really trying, like I've said continuously, I love doing these because you guys get to dictate the conversation. You guys, the co-host, y'all's comments are great. Your questions are great. And, why not just let you guys be my co-host? I love doing it. I really do. Lisa Fitz, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. Thank you so much. Players were renegotiating NIL deals in the weeks leading up to the Rose Bowl. That had a major negative impact on performance of certain guys. That is certainly a possibility, and Alabama's not the only one that's dealing with that, but that is something that when you've got a really big game coming up, this is why I don't like the transfer portal window being where it is. They played one day before the window opened. So, of course, these guys who are talking to their agents and it's getting ready to be game time, and game time is in the portal window opening, not the literal game time, that you're going to be saying, hey, coach, what you going to do to keep me out of the portal? And everybody who's still playing by January 1st is dealing with that. It's not just Alabama. So it's not an excuse. Indiana, I'm sure to an extent, was probably dealing with some of that. Georgia was, everybody else. It was still in the playoffs. But that can be a distraction, and it is a problem. And that's why I think they need to do something about, I like the fact they went to one portal window. You got to figure out a way to enforce there just being one, because I still think people are going to test post-spring. But, at least they're trying to do something on that. I just would like to see it moved. And, because right now that you do need to move the portal window, but then you need to have a good chunk of time where everybody's finished with their season. There's at least like a week where you can go through those negotiations and everything else, and then the window open. You got to be, and I get that that's difficult with the academic calendar, but you got to do something because they just, it's too much of a problem right now. Way too much of a problem. Pat Nelly, I couldn't even spell Indiana without autocorrect before this season. Go figure. One thing I will say, guys, and I will say it from now until the end of time. People or programs or teams or coaches or players, they've earned my respect before. Indiana is at or near the top. Just in the way that they earned my respect, because I even said, and I'm normally not the takey guy. I'm not the one that you're going to pull a bunch of stuff and freezing cold takes me, because I'm not interested in the clickbaity stuff. Granted, you got to play the game to an extent with titles and thumbnails and all that stuff. I get it. But as far as me coming on here and, I want everybody to be talking about what I said, I want everybody to be talking about Cover Crimson and Clint Lamb. Let me say this thing that I really don't believe just to say it. That's never been me. That's never going to be me. I have no interest in doing that. I want to be as real as possible. But, Indy, I kind of had a little bit of a takey clip, but because it was honest. And what I essentially said was, I don't see a scenario where Indiana blows out Alabama. I don't, because you look at, when they played Penn State and Iowa and even Oregon, like towards the end of that game, Oregon had, was a one-score game. And I was just in there saying, they haven't really blown anybody out. That was, Illinois, but I didn't think Illinois was even close to being as good as Alabama. So with the way Alabama had I understand with Georgia, but the injuries were playing a part in that SEC championship with Alabama. So I just said, I don't see a scenario where they blow them out. And then they didn't blow them out. They could have been way worse. I couldn't have been more wrong. And I had a lot of people coming at me, but here's the thing. I was wrong. I'll own that I was wrong. And they didn't just prove me wrong. They beat it into my head. I watched Alabama get beat so bad that it's like, man, I was giving Indiana plenty of respect going into the week. I wasn't saying, Alabama's going to destroy them or anything like that, but they earned my respect by how they played. And it wasn't just against Alabama. It was pretty much each and every opponent that they were put against for most of the season. Indiana fans, they got too cocky. They were one of those teams that when you go from being essentially irrelevant to, like, you're not just the top dog, you're beating the mess out of a lot of the blue bloods. A lot of these guys do this every year. You're destroying them. This is new, uncharted territory. So that was something that I've never seen that before. I've never seen a program have a turnaround like that. And I can't really sit there and say, well, of course their fan base didn't handle it well. They haven't been there before, So, and granted, a lot of them were also respectful. The fact that I was willing to own it and just take my, licks because I was wrong. A lot of them were, pretty chill about it. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Indiana was different. And I just Alabama is capable of that. I don't think Indiana, I understand Mark Cuban's coming in and they got some good NIL. But I don't think that Indiana's not Texas. Indiana's not Texas Tech or Texas A&M. Those are the ones from a financial standpoint, you just can't compete. You just can't. And that doesn't mean that you're not competitive, up there in the top 6 or 7 or 5 or whatever, but you're just not. When it comes to those core group right there at the top, it's tough to be competitive, but you can compete with Indiana. There's no reason that you can't do what Indiana can do. I understand maybe it's because they have Kurt Signetti. Maybe everybody said that about Alabama for so long when Alabama had Nick Saban. Alabama's nothing special, maybe that, but at the same time, Alabama should be able to do a lot, if not everything that Indiana does. So go figure out a way to get it done. Let's see. Bama Boy Davis, Saban's third year resulted in a championship. Can DeBoer follow suit? Well, that's a good point. And I feel like Alabama, here's the problem that I have with that. And I wish I could remember Alabama's third year that they had John Parker Wilson in 2008. So they were bringing in a new quarterback, Greg McElroy. Obviously Mark Ingram had success in 2008 and they were bringing in guys. You had Trent Richardson, you had Julio coming back. They had some dudes coming back. I kind of wish I remember what people were saying. Like, was Alabama after the season that they had where they went 12-2? I want to say that they were pretty highly respected going into that season. But I will say the way that I'm looking at this Alabama team right now is there's a lot of questions. I love the talent. That's what I say every time. I love the talent. And I think that there are so many scenarios where this comes together beautifully. And maybe there's some growing pains at points, maybe early in the season, maybe even, all the way to the midway point, or maybe, there are scenarios where I think it can really come together for Alabama very, very well. But there's a lot of question marks, and I can't guarantee you that it is all going to come together. So with those question marks, I don't think it's anything where I'm going to sit here and tell you, well, this is a national championship contending team. I've continued to reiterate, this is a college football playoff contending team in my view right now. I put them in that 10 to 15 range based off of what I know, but I think they have the upside to be a top 10 team. I think they have the upside to really, if things really started to pick up, maybe at that point we would view them as a national title contender. But right now, I think there's we'll have to wait and see how it ends up going. Alpha Dog, who got hurt? Now that I think about it, I hope you guys didn't read the thumb. Well, no, let me rephrase that. That wouldn't be you guys reading the thumbnail wrong. That would be me. Hope I didn't misrepresent what we're talking about here. Jakarius Peak, South Carolina, has nothing to do with Alabama. It did. He's a player that was connected to Alabama briefly, but nobody's hurt for Alabama. The whole point of this show initially was just to talk about the transfer portal. The fact that a lot of people wanted them to pay pretty substantial money to get Jakarius Peak, and then he ends up getting hurt. What if he went to Alabama and got paid all that money and really disrupted the locker room dynamics and how you operate, and then he gets injured? How would that have impacted Alabama and the way that we want them to build, this program and team? That's kind of the entire point, and I hope I pitched that the right way in the title and stuff, because I didn't make anybody think coming in that Alabama had an injury, because they don't. They do not. So apologize about that, Alpha Dog. All right, we've gone about 50 minutes. We're going to start wrapping this up. We're 15 days away from the start of spring practice, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure. I want to say it's 2 weeks from tomorrow. And so it's time, guys. We had a couple of weeks. It was slow. There wasn't a whole lot going on. We still had discussions. It was great talks, but now it's time. The previewing, the diving in, and we've talked a lot about individual positions. So some of it will be being reiterated, but I've got some fun stuff coming up as far as breaking down a lot of these position groups leading up to spring practice. I've been putting together my roster rankings, and those are going to be fun to talk about, kind of letting you guys know where I think this roster stands and how it stacks up going into spring ball. And then we'll be doing a summer version or a post-spring version of this afterwards. And the NFL Combine is coming up this week. And Ty Simpson is going to be throwing. Well, number one, I love that. Two, there was absolutely no reason for him not to throw, assuming he was back and recovered from the injuries that he dealt with throughout the season. But Fernando Mendoza is not throwing. Granted, I understand it. And Ty Simpson, I don't think is threatening Fernando Mendoza for the number one quarterback or the number one overall pick. But Ty Simpson can help himself in Indianapolis this week. And Ty Simpson, I'm telling you, coaches are going to love him on a whiteboard, and they're going to love the personality. He's a coach's son. He says a lot of the right things. You can trust him in front of the media. You don't have to worry about, hey, if we throw him out there to the Wolves, how's he going to handle it? Is he going to be overly emotional? He's going to say something wrong. Is he going to misrepresent us? None of that stuff. I think he's a guy that the coaches and the scouts alike are going to be impressed with him in Indianapolis. He's not going to wow anybody in shorts. He's not. I think from an accuracy standpoint, maybe he does some good things. I think from an arm standpoint, he's fine. I don't think he's elite. He's not going to go out there and be a Cam Newton in shorts or a Josh Allen, a guy with just an absolute gun. And he's just doing, even a Zach Wilson, who wasn't overly big, but his arm strength, just some of the things he can do, just stupid. But I don't think he's going to be doing any of that. Where he's going to win is the off the field stuff, and I think he'll do enough on the field. He'll be a good enough athlete, if he elects to do some of that stuff. I don't know if he'll run the 40 or not, but I think he'll do enough off the field. And I think he's going to be the quarterback too in this NFL draft. Really, who else is it going to be at this point? But I think he'll do enough. There will be questions about the starting experience, the number of starts, but I also think that he's to a point where he's shown enough from between the years where NFL teams will say, well, he might take some seasoning. But I think in due time, he's a starting caliber quarterback and, maybe he can be a pretty good one. So I'm excited about it, no doubt. No doubt about it. Dead inside, we thought they were a national title contender this past season with all the experience they had. That's that's something that I've said several times. I'm right there with you. Experience isn't everything, but I also know that when you look at the experience, we talked about, I think on Thursday night, we talked about the experience factor with the offensive line and how it impacted the last three national champions, Michigan, Ohio State, and Indiana. They had a ton of experience going into their respective seasons where they won the national title. As far as up front with their offensive line, they were very experienced going in, only got more experience throughout the season. And I think that ultimately did end up helping each of them win a national title. But to be fair, Alabama also had a ton of experience in 2025, going into 2025. So it's not just about the experience. It's about the fit too. And I think the fit is what was lacking. Here's the thing. The experienced guys, you can keep stacking the experience. Sure, that helps. But if a guy doesn't fit, he's never going to fit. But if a guy fits, the experience will come as well. So while Alabama is lacking the experience side of it, they will get more experienced. And by 2027, hopefully they can keep the group pretty much together and they can really be experienced and they fit. That will be a beautiful thing. But even throughout the course of 2026, maybe that experience each and every week, getting the continuity as much as you possibly can, stop with all the unnecessary rotating and get those guys out there and let them start growing and building together. Maybe as the experience gets a little bit better over the course of the season, maybe you end up getting a much better product than you saw in 2025. So that's the way that I've been presenting it to everybody. Now, experience is important. So we're not going to say, oh, it'll be fine. They'll be okay. No, experience is no. Experience is, it is important. It has been important for the last three national champions. And so that's something to at least keep in mind. Mimi, spring practice. Can't wait for all the info. Appreciate you, Clint. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody who hopped on. It's Sunday night. You know, you about an hour from now, you got the season finale of Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I'm excited about it. I know you guys could be doing anything with your Sunday nights, and all you guys are right here contributing to the chat. People sending in super chats. Thank you guys so much once again. And just we appreciate everything that you guys do for us. We love this. I love this. And I love you guys. Thank y'all from the bottom of my heart. I will never stop being appreciative for what you guys do for me and what you guys do for Cover Crimson. It means the absolute world to us. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you are not subscribed, we want to make you a part of this family. We want you to be here consistently. Turn on that notification bell. Get the alerts. Let us know or allow us to let you know when we go live and when we post new content, so where you guys can check it out. A lot going to be coming up as spring ball quickly approaches. And then also get on over to rowback.com. Use the promo code Crimson20 to get 20% off your order. And we will talk to you guys soon.